Let me see it. Am I can I see it? Wait,
Huh? No, it's already, you can see online.
Wait, are you keeping the one that we did? That you took a man?
Sir, I was staring at the back. You got a new one? Mister, you got a new one?
Those aren't the right eyes. What the fuck is
Can you see the chain over? I forgot how to do it.
Okay, so Asia. Okay, so I'm gonna recap of everything. Some of you guys don't remember. I'm here re-stress those restrictions. So we talked about yesterday, y equal to sine of x, and what are the restrictions, and we draw it out. And then the domain restriction here is going to be what?
Negative pi over 2.
Negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, right? And the range restriction is between
No,
1,
negative 1 and 1.
right? So y equal to sine inverse of x is going to
The
be,
inverse of, just switch them.
switch them.
Yeah. So you
But you have to understand what I meant. We're going to ask you literally in a second. So this one is going to be negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. So that is the range. This is output, okay? So we're going to graph this part. So we know a unit circle is between this part and this part, between first quadrant and the fourth quadrant, but not pass through the second and third. Not pass through the second and third. Because just think about this electric gate here. You're going to die when you cross here. So you got to make sure you don't cross that part. Especially when we deal with inverse only, not this one. Okay?
Wait, so you can cross it on sine x, on y equals sine x? Or?
Yeah, one sine of x is there is no restriction. Only the inverse has restriction. Okay? So cosine of x is going to be, domain is going to be negative pi over 2. No, sorry, 0.
Pi.
Isn't it not negative?
Pi.
That's not inverse. It wouldn't be inverse then. You
Yeah.
put inverse on top
Cosine inverse x.
for cosine inverse x. And if you start with the domain being 0 pi, it wouldn't be
You're
inverse.
right. Good job.
Thank you.
Zero to pi.
I'm learning. Thank you.
Negative 1 to 1.
Just because you're a thinker, you're living up to it. I'm proud.
Is that correct?
I hate that you said that. I want a cookie though.
So cosine of inverse of x. Cosine of inverse of x. This one is going to give me that
Negative 1.
It would be negative 1, 1, and then the range would be
negative 1 to 1. And range is going to be what?
0 to pi.
0 to pi. So that's the output. Asia, how many times I told you to pay attention? No, you're not. Y equal to 10 of x. Now, domain on this one is kind of tricky. What is it?
It is negative pi over 2.
But if y is a parenthesis,
Because it's like in the range.
it's a parenthesis because you cannot including the pi over 2 because that's asymptote, right? And here, y equal to 10 inverse of x. That's going to be domain is going to be
Negative infinity.
negative infinity to infinity. Range is going to be negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. So this one here, again, all of them has kind of electric gate here. And this one is going to be not including the axis. So I didn't touch the x-axis. Here you can actually touch the x-axis. You can touch the y-axis here. But this one you cannot touch the y-axis.
Okay.
So we went over the question, what is a sine inverse of negative square root 3 over 2? Now I want you to think about this. And also think about the restriction as well. If you don't think about restriction, that's where you start screwing things up.
It's, negative 5
For 3.
right?
Oh, yeah, no, never.
Oh, yeah. Stupid.
What is it, sine?
So a question like this, you say, that means that the y value is square root 3 over 2, and then what's the sine inverse of that? Yes. Negative pi over what? 3. So the answer is going to be negative pi over 3, yes. Does that make sense? Not 5 pi over 3, because 5 pi over 3 you cross this part.
The border.
Okay, so that is not a
I think you felt
cross the
smart.
border. Okay?
Wow.
Donald Trump's going to catch you.
If you go to Mexico, you never come back.
Oh my god.
Okay, so we can actually give you some harder question. So for example, if I were to give you 10 inverse of
Wow.
negative square root 3, then you say, okay, well, what is 10 inverse of negative square root 3?
Okay. Okay, so it's 5.
Now for you guys to think about it, because you're gonna have a question like this, you say, how do I deal with,
Yeah, I don't know how to do that.
Wait, mister.
Negative, it's negative pi over 3 again. Right,
Sure.
mister?
That's
Mister,
the thing.
say
What?
pi over 3 again, right?
work it out, work it out.
Okay. What? How do I get it? Yeah, are you guys gonna get it?
Yeah, I did it on here.
Because you're supposed to.
I don't know. I give up. Tell me.
What,
How to do it.
Because tangent is y over x, right? So what y times like x thing would equal negative pi over 3?
Oh, 10 is.
Like the coordinates. I just went backwards in my head. I went, what equals negative pi over 3? Like what things will and what equals negative square root of 3? I went from negative square root of 3, so then I went through negative. I went through I know it's the fourth quadrant is negative. So I went through my head. It's not the negative pi over 4 because that's square root of 2 over 2. That'd be square root of 2 over 2 times 2 square root of 2 squared. Okay? So it's either negative pi over 6 or negative pi over 3. Negative pi over 6. The square root of 2 is on the bottom. See that one? Okay, when you get it. So square root of 3 might be the top.
Okay.
Negative pi.
Let's start with
Yeah.
let's start with Kelvis. What do you think?
Kelvin.
Kelvin? Sorry.
That's Kevin.
Kevin.
What do you?
Kevin.
confused.
Kelvin.
No,
Okay.
Kelvin.
That's a Kelvin. Yeah.
Okay, Kevin, what'd you get? Negative pi over 3 is the right answer.
Good job, Kevin.
Good job.
Why do I say negative pi over 3? Because you want to think about one as the sine over cosine of which radian it's going to give you. So you have option. Obviously, you're not going to pick anything pi over 4 because pi over 4 is going to give you 1 or negative 1. So therefore, there's only 2 other options, at pi over 3 or pi over 6. For me, I memorize it. What do I memorize? I memorize it in here, right? In terms of tangent values, I know at 45 degrees, that's going to give me 1. At a 30 degree or pi over 6, that's going to give me a less than 1 value, which is square root of 3 over 3. And now here, it's going to be square root of 3. So I know if I see square root of 3 in terms of tangent, it's always going to be at pi over 3, any pi over 3. But in this case, it's negative pi over 3. So I actually remember this one here. It helped me a lot when I'm solving a problem. And the rest of them is our reference angle. Yes.
And then in between the square root of 3 and the 1, that's the 5 over 6. Or I mean 5 over 3, sorry. Or,
This is a pi over 6, this is a pi over 4, this is a pi over 3.
oh, okay. Oh, that's just the tangent thing?
That's just the
Oh,
tangent
okay,
value.
okay.
So I remember those values, so for me it's easier to work. I don't think about it anymore, I just kinda, okay, I understand that part. Does that make sense? Okay, so what if I would ask you like this? Now this question is a little bit more trickier. And one of the questions would present like this, so you gotta figure out what I meant. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna give you a question like this. We're gonna give you sine inverse of pi over 2. Sine inverse pi over 2. Now this one turns out to be one of the more difficult questions that students don't understand how to do it. So sine inverse of pi over 2.
Can you fix the N? It's bothering me. Because it says sine.
Okay, what is sine of inverse of pi over 2? Let's see how many of you guys get this one.
Wait,
Sine? Okay.
I'll do this one.
I would look at a restriction though.
Oh! Wouldn't it be? I dropped the pencil. No?
Because of the borderline.
Yeah, it touches the border because
It
it's
gets,
sine.
yeah, for sine can go on.
For sine, you can touch the border.
You just have to go past.
For
The
tangent,
tan, you can't touch the border.
it would be just 1, right?
So, it'd be one. Would it?
If I'm right, it's a few.
Yeah, it should be
What
one.
would you get?
Unless it's negative.
One?
No, is it?
It's actually.
I don't know.
Board, anybody know the answer? Raise your hand. What do you think?
1.
No.
0.
Is it negative one?
No.
3 pi over 2.
You're just guessing now.
No, that's the, okay, I was,
Mister, I have another guy.
Yeah.
0.
it was
No.
close.
Oh,
Negative?
okay.
No.
Yeah. I wonder 0 when I was
Jeremy? Yeah.
What?
What?
Was it?
Negative
What? Why?
I just.
You did say that, but you did it with the wrong reason. Okay, so undefined, it is undefined. Shh. Think about it, undefined, right? It's a bit, remember, this is the input. The input value has to be between -1 to 1. But what is pi over 2?
More than 1.
More than 1, why? Pi is 3, right?
Yeah.
3 over 2 is 1.5. So therefore, that one is actually undefined. So you have to think about all those things when you process information. That's why I say this restriction chart is something that's to help you. And not only you have to worry about this, you have to worry about the output, input, you have to worry about all of them. Okay? So you have to think about all the stuff. So
I was close.
those are one of the few questions that students struggle. So let me give you another thing that students always struggle, which is something like this. Cosine of
Yeah, I like these.
sine inverse of negative square root of negative 1/2.
I just dropped it, I forgot I had
You
to
made me
do
start
one pushback,
writing.
so
Alright. So cosine sine inverse of negative 1/2.
So you do inside first, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But you gotta figure out inside correctly. Okay, inside, remember anytime you have inverse, there's a restriction. And we're gonna talk about that on Monday, especially in this class. Second period in this class, we're gonna talk about a deeper meaning. And we're gonna talk about a graph of like cosine inverse or cosine x, which is or cosine of cosine inverse of
Wait
x.
for me. Can you wait for me?
Yeah,
Just
we're
word
good.
of birth, please. Can you wait?
Yeah, Sophie, can you stop being selfish? Shout your answer and other people stop thinking when you shout the answer. Yes. Just like you print 6 pages out of the print.
That was more than
That was more than 6 pages.
It was like 12 pages.
I don't know how I legitimately.
And the ink was like double because they were double-sided.
And I don't know how we just randomly print it. I'm so serious.
Mm-hmm.
For the last one, what was it? I didn't need to print it.
Because pi, right? Pi is 3.14, did you say? 3.14 is over 2, right? So it's about 1.5. But remember the restriction is between -1. The input has to be between -1 to 1. The output can be negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, but the input has to be between 1 and -1. So let's start from inside though. What you get for inside?
I got.
You should get negative pi over 6. And then you should get square root 3 over 2. So you have to know your unit circle by.
No, I know it. No, I know it. I just can't.
He can't write it.
It just takes him. It just takes.
He can't, oh.
His iPad.
It just takes.
He just can't focus when it comes to tests.
Okay, so anyway,
He
so
couldn't write it.
Write it fast enough.
so those are the interesting questions. But I'm gonna give you something a little bit harder. So sometimes you're gonna get this case that you wanna say, well, how do I do this problem? Hold on. Before that, so we're gonna give you something like this. What is sine of sine inverse that says 2/5 negative? So this one here,
Oh, these are the ones that are like F, G.
Whoa.
no, it's not. So I'm gonna go over with you. Hold on.
Please.
I'm gonna go over with you. So this one you have to think. So I think the nice part about this quarter is it's not a lot of work, not a lot of algebra work, but it's more a thinking process. So a lot of people is like, I'm gonna jump in and do the problem. It's not jumping into the problem. It's actually you're thinking how to do a problem. So we're gonna talk about this. Now you say sine inverse of -2/5. Okay. Let's start solving the problem first. Let's talk about what do you think the end result is gonna be? Is it gonna be 2 choices, ratio, trig ratio, or radians? What do you think it's going to be?
The end result.
The end result, whatever the end result is gonna be a
No, listen.
radian or ratio.
Well, that you're gonna get a radian from it, and then from that you're gonna get a ratio. You're gonna get a point.
So that's the first question you should ask yourself. What is that gonna end with? So David was right. This part is gonna give you an angle, right? A radian, some type of radian, some type of angle. And then you're gonna have sine of that angle, and it's gonna give you back to the ratio. So this type of question, you gotta be more cautious. This is a question that you say, wait, okay, what is the end result? But you say, well, we don't know because 2/5 is not really in the unit circle. Does that make sense? Unit circle value, you got 1/2, you got square root 3/2, you got square root 2/2, you got 1, you got 0, but there was never a -2/5. So then you say, that's an issue, but we are going back to look for sine. So we say, wait, maybe we can do something with the reference triangle, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna think about this is gonna give me some type of data. So sine inverse of 92/5 is some type of angle, obviously, because when we evaluate this, we're gonna give you angle. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So now I'm gonna go in to look for the quadrant. Well, when the sine inverse is negative, which 2 quadrant is?
1 and 4.
3 and 4, right? So we're gonna put a 2 check mark here. We're gonna put a 2 check mark here. Now, sine inverse, which one is that?
There was 2, 4.
So this 2, right? But which one has 2 check mark? This one. So this one is the one that I'm gonna decide by. So we have this one, we have this one, so we're gonna draw a reference triangle here, and this is some type of angle. And this one's gonna give you, well, we talk about hypotenuse is never negative. So this is -2. And this is 5. And you can actually figure out this side, but I don't really care. If I figure out that side, it's gonna give you, let's say, square root 21.
Because you do.
Okay.
Oh.
So square root 21, but you can figure out the side or you don't, because in this case you don't really need to. Because they say sine of this is gonna give me this angle. Now, sine inverse of this is gonna give me an angle, but what is sine of this angle? It's going back to -2/5. But if I change this question just a tiny bit, what if I say cosine of sine inverse of 2/5? Negative. Then what do you think the answer is going to be? If I just change the sine to cosine. We know the restriction is still following the same reference triangle.
5 over.
It would be square root of 2. Is that 2 or 21?
21.
Yeah, it would be square root of 21 over 5.
Yep.
Wait, where do you guys square?
Oh, that's because.
Yeah, I'm still a little confused.
Okay, so can I say this is an angle? Can I say that's equal to cosine of some type of angle? The angle is composed of this reference triangle. What is cosine of the angle? Is ca. So it's adjacent over hypotenuse. So adjacent square root 21, hypotenuse is 5.
How'd you get 21?
Then how do you solve the sine one?
I'm still.
The sine one is gonna be the exact same thing because sine is what? The opposite over hypotenuse, so opposite over hypotenuse, so it's -2/5.
Oh! Okay, but how'd you get 21?
So,
How'd you get square root of 21?
yes, Deborah? Oh, that's not important, go.
That was not important.
I know, you don't ask, but we just read.
I use Precalculus identity, so 5 squared is equal to x squared, no, y squared plus x squared. So I'm gonna figure out y is -2 because that was given to me, plus x squared, and then that's gonna be x squared is equal to 25 minus 4, x is equal to square root 21, plus minus, but this case is plus because of the quadrant.
Okay, I get that.
Okay, so I'll let you try questions. This type of question is a little bit more challenging, but it's also quite fun. But you have to figure out what the hard part is. So I'm gonna ask you this question.
Wait, but what was inside of the parentheses? What was the answer to that? So the final answer was -2 over 5. What
Square root
was-
21 over 5.
Wait, but
For
what
cosine,
is
the
it?
answer.
Oh my God.
Because cosine
For
is
cosine, because.
adjacent over hypotenuse.
So
I never even looked at cosine. I was trying to understand.
okay, so I'm gonna give you this. I'm gonna say 13 and -5.
Big number.
Okay, and I'm gonna say what is tangent of this. So now you're gonna figure out the quadrant using the check mark system. So when cosine is negative, so you think about you're gonna put 2 check mark on when cosine is negative, and then put a 2 check mark on the inverse. Cosine inverse restriction, which is 2 quadrants, and there should be a quadrant has 2 check mark. Okay, and that check mark should be able to help you to draw a reference triangle. Once you draw a reference triangle, everything is set. Here's the biggest part: if you know how to draw a reference triangle, everything's gonna be perfect.
It's the
Can you show us how?
Yes, the butterfly thing. Yes.
Can you show us like how to find like which quadrant?
Okay. Remember the previous question? What was the previous question I asked you?
It was sine of sine inverse.
Okay, sine of
Sine inverse.
sine inverse of what?
-2 over 5.
-2 over 5, right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna start with when does a y value, sine is telling me y value, right? So when's y value negative? Down 2 quadrants, so I put a 2 check mark on the bottom, right? And what is sine inverse restriction.
Right.
Right? So therefore, this is the quadrant I'm drawing reference triangle. Okay, you're gonna do the same thing for this one and figure out what is it. And you might need a Pythagorean identity, you might need a Pythagorean triplets. So a lot of times it's gonna help you if you know the triplets. Everybody in this room knows how to do this problem. Everybody.
For the tangent one, to do the checks, is it the all the ways the tangent?
You only worry about cosine. You only worry about restriction, which is this is the angle. So this is the check mark you had to do.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Action, don't do this now.
It's pretty easy. It's kind of fun.
Okay.
Kind of fun.
I'll go that
It's
far.
fun when you understand it.
Good. So how about
Perfect.
try to understand?
All math is fun when you understand it. It
It's
just matters if you
because-
understand it or not.
Is it the second quadrant? Cause the second and then since yeah.
Make sure you guys are pretty good.
I'm surprised at myself, to be honest.
I'm surprised, to be honest.
It's true
What's good?
because I'm like,
That's good. That was an insult, but it was
Because-
actually good that I'm
yeah,
surprised.
I know, but it's just because my sister, she calls me a lot now, and she's always trying to help me with it, like with pre-calc, because she knows I'm bad at
She's
it.
really smart.
Her boyfriend is very smart,
Oh, okay.
so they try to help me.
Oh, okay, that's sweet.
Wait, how do you finish?
Yes.
Yeah, like you,
We're doing we're entering
yeah, like 160. That's what I did. It's 140 now.
Why is Jacqueline?
I think they're on a field trip because we have to go to.
Oh, I thought you meant because if you remember, because those
Yeah, either.
Okay, is that right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's easy to say.
No, you're not picking up that. You're not even trying to do just the inverse part, just this part. Just this one has two information here, because this one's gonna give me an angle. The angle has to be constructed line of the triangle. So you don't even worry about tangent.
And then it will be a square plus -5. Okay.
David.
Yeah.
I'll just put +5.
6270.
Guys, we probably just have to.
Sophia. 3290. Yeah, 3290 is the medium. 4397. 4397. Bo.
Viv, he's calling numbers for this.
Okay.
you can solve for.
Yeah, but these ones, this one and this one. And I took it this one right. I didn't know.
Wait, right somehow.
Yeah, what'd you get? Like
Sophia? 5, 3, 4, 5, 5, 3, 4,
Wait,
5.
so that this
I should have done it yesterday.
Oh my god. I got the question right, but then no period.
Bryce?
Yo, I love that he just bounces off the game. That is crazy.
Jeremy?
Yo! Is that look at it. It just bounces off his hair. Stay away. Wait,
What'd you get him?
that's so cool.
Yeah, I see, of course.
That's a trick right there.
52! You did better than I did!
I never told you this, right?
Oh, mister, I wanna take it individually.
9, 7, 5, 8.
Jeremy, what'd you get?
Did I knock her out? Sorry, how did I knock her out?
Jeremy,
I literally did it.
Did I get this right?
Kevin? 8, 2, 8, 4.
dude, did he never told us about this?
Wait, what?
Hold.
What?
I got that equation, but then not Did he call me? Okay, how tragic, like, we're trying to like hear me. You know it's still recording?
Oh.
Lida?
I got
5, 2, 6, 4.
I didn't even know you were supposed to do something.
No. Oh no, it's 1 point more than me.
Johanna?
That's it. It's okay, he's still not looking at
I got 46, so don't feel bad.
I got 85.
We all got better than him on this.
You got 88. I got 88.
I have 76. I have 76.
It's probably like a.
Yeah, I did better than
I'm
you.
big.
How you feel?
You like fisted my mouth. God.
Break your.
Yeah, you hit my face.
Nasia?
Square.
1, 7, 4, 8. 1, 7, 4, 8. Kinsey?
Not right angle. Yeah,
4, 9, 2, 6. Five, 7, 4, 2.
Wait, you have 82?
Leah?
Was that I forgot that these don't take amplitudes?
4, 6, 1, 9. Two, 3, 0, 5. 4, 3, 1, 4.
No, the reason why I got this wrong is because he told me. So. Even
I got.
so you beat me by 2 points.
So we're negative five.
Hey, what do you get?
I remember that these were.
Hey, you're supposed to be the leader of this table. Let's not lead this table. What's on my head? He's hilarious.
I just had to give you a face.
Mister, do you want us to end the live stream?
You didn't come back. It will only give you half, 50%. And I thought that one was
Right there.
Alright, so what do you think the answer is?
Whoa, I'm not sure.
Okay, so guys, okay, let's pay attention up here. Everybody, pay attention up here. Everybody. So figure out which quadrant is this. What's cosine inverse? Well, cosine inverse has the top two quadrants. What you say?
Yes, yeah.
So there's two quadrants, right?
Yeah.
Now negative only at this quadrant here. So now you says because negative, cosine is negative, that means x is negative. That means this two quadrant. So the reference angle had to join right here. Now this is a -5 and this is a 13. Because hypotenuse can never be negative. So therefore, is this one here, -5, 13. Pythagorean triplet told me that this one is what? 12. Or you can use Pythagorean identity, solve it. But if I know my Pythagorean triplet, I can find out the answer really easily. So now, I'm going to get this. So then you say, okay, what is 10 of that? Tangent of this theta is equal to y over x. So y is equal to 12 over -5, so the answer is -12 over 5. You want to try again or no?
Yeah.
You got this? Okay, let's try again.
Yes.
So,
I'm gonna name a problem. So I'm gonna say cosine. Actually, I'm gonna do tangent.
Calculators in class. Nicole.
I'm gonna do tangent.
Yay.
I got it right. I'm so surprised.
24 and -7. Okay, and then we're gonna ask you what is secant of this.
Secant is cosine, right?
Yeah, I got higher income, right? So
Okay, so we're gonna put a negative sign in the front, so that way you have to decide which one is negative. Okay, so this one's a harder one. This one you have to figure out the x is negative or y is negative.
Well, you just gave it to us.
Why?
I didn't give it to you.
Yeah, you said 7 was negative.
No, I didn't.
No, we didn't.
I just put it in the front on the middle right now.
Mister, how am I supposed to figure that out?
I was doing so good.
It's trial and error.
Why?
No, then you gotta think.
I find my own negative. I feel that matters. I don't care.
What if I choose the wrong side? Does it make a big difference?
Yes, it does.
It does? Good to know.
No, the graph you can keep it.
Wait, how is this one wrong? How is the in between? How's this one wrong?
I counted.
But you got it right. You got this one right.
I know you actually did.
What?
But you got the answers right.
This one, it says the amplitude is the got right, and then the amplitude is harder.
No, you have to get that all correct.
Oh, okay.
All three.
So,
Come on, next question.
What's 24? Can we do 24 squared on the calculator, please?
whoa.
576.
Thank you.
Whoa.
You should know all those values.
24 squared?
Okay.
24 squared?
Yeah.
What did I just say?
I'm confused.
That makes more sense.
You should know all the things.
Yeah, okay.
The hardest part is to figure out which quadrant is. If you figure out which quadrant, then you're set.
Yeah, that's my problem. That's my problem.
What's the square root of 625?
She's weirder than Nina.
Okay, listen up, mister. I'm so hot in the middle of class. Like,
You gave 625.
Stop it. Where's the
look at this pencil floating.
Oh, secant? Ooh.
It's still going.
Which quadrant?
1 over
It's
Yeah.
It's in the fourth. Guys,
But then, I don't know what number is like.
I did 7. I would guess.
Okay.
Well, if it's
what?
If it's a
Because
negative,
yeah, because the adjacent is on the x-axis, okay? So 7 has to be negative. It was in the fourth quadrant.
no, but then it could be. No, it's in the second. It's in the second. It's in
What?
the second, yeah, because then the adjacent would be on the x and then
Yeah.
since if
They're like, so five hands.
Oh, you right.
What?
Right?
Sure.
Are you doing it?
Yeah.
Right.
What?
What? 24 squared.
I wrote it.
Oh, 576. Yeah.
Stop sharing
No,
the answer.
24
It's not
squared.
necessary on the top, the 9% is just.
576. 576. 576. The closest
Is it in the
being
So, when's 10
How do you
negative?
get a small?
5.76 for 24 squared.
So you, okay.
Oh, okay.
So we already have.
24 times 24, not 5.
That's my
When's
problem.
10 negative?
So you know how this is moving first and this is moving. So if it's like this,
Secant is 1 over
Cos.
Oh!
What is the y on the x?
1 over sine. It's 1 over sine. Cosine.
Yeah.
So that
okay, he
is.
did it.
Right. What's the square root of 16
That x? This is the x.
Wait,
25?
That's the hypotenuse.
It's 28.
I don't believe you.
I'm curious, isn't it 25?
Yeah.
I'm calculating, I'm not gonna.
You believe?
She's a calculator, so she's not gonna calculate. She's superior.
It's 25 or 25 or 24. That's what you got?
There.
Yo, I feel
So
smart.
now you gotta try hypotenuse it. A squared plus b squared equals c squared.
Is there, it's 25 or 24. What? It's 25 or 24.
You know how to say. So 7 and negative 24.
Is it?
No. So if you get the fourth quadrant, I guess.
it was either in 1 or 4.
How?
That's what I'm saying. It was either in 1 or 4.
No, it's not.
Oh, okay. It's on the fourth?
Huh?
It's not 25 or 24? That's what Sophie got too.
I got 25 over 6. Wait, okay.
It's in the fourth quadrant. Is it not in the fourth quadrant?
Your drawing, go check your drawing.
Whose?
That's what I was saying. I was like,
Secant is the opposite of cosine.
Is there another
It would be
way to
25 over
Is
24.
it just 1 over 4?
Yeah.
Wait, he just.
Or you just upside down the
She can't even
cosine.
explain to me in this, but you guess.
I'm not sure if it's right.
The answer is,
Wait.
don't tell me.
Say the answer.
25 was pretty.
No, wait.
You got 25 or 24?
Yo, you hear
You're the old outlier.
How?
I get from
But you're right.
I am? Okay.
He said you were right, but you're the outlier.
Okay, look. How?
What'd you get, Amelia?
what?
I got
What'd
it.
you get, Journey?
25
this. No.
Everybody got that.
24.
Why 24 negative?
I'm so confused.
The 7's negative.
How's 7 negative?
I don't know if I'm right with
Because
like
7 is the
opposite over adjacent.
How do you get such high numbers?
Wait, this
Yeah, see, Mr. So the 7's negative in the fourth quadrant. It's 25 or 24.
Opposite would be 24.
Yeah.
Your drawing's wrong, Bryce.
How about you're wrong?
Opposite would be 24. So the opposite.
Opposite's 24.
Opposite's 24.
It's y over x.
Which quadrant?
Tan
Mister,
is 24.
is it negative 24?
Opposite, you're right.
No, Arjun's right.
Can you tell?
The answer is 7 over
So I was right.
7 over 24.
See, you got it wrong.
That's the
No, 7 over 25, sorry.
Wait,
No, 25 was 7, sorry. 25 was 7.
Okay, can you make up your mind?
25/7. Amelia, did you get it? No, you're right. That's correct. 25/7. Hypotenuse over adjacent, so it's 25/7. No, I don't want it back. We need to study for the next test.
I'm gonna hang it on my fridge.
The building on all my customers in the back. They all want them here.
25/7.
Oh wait, Emilio.
It's still going, you know that?